2016 was a roller coaster of a year that seems to only get worse, with gaming being no exception. This year saw an influx of supposed AAA titles releasing half-finished, and companies making decisions that have gamers questioning the future, rather than being excited for it. But it wasn't all bad. There's quite a number of good games that came out this year, some we'd never thought we'd see. There's a couple things we gotta get out of the way first. One, this list does not include games that I've already reviewed, though the ones that are on this list may get reviewed in the future. And two, it does include games not from this year. It's a list of everything I played and beat for the first time, and so without further ado, the Neo Review's definitive, not definitive list of 2016. If you take a look back on everything I've reviewed or talked about, Destiny would seem like the last thing to appear on this list. But lo and behold, it's a pretty solid title. Destiny is the closest thing to an MMO I've gotten behind, with its mostly fun missions and solid loot system. It doesn't take long to beef up your character and start getting some cool powers. The real hook for me was the multiplayer, mainly that you can co-op the whole game with pals. I'm not into competitive multiplayer, and companies seem so apprehensive to give us more games where you can play the campaign with friends, that Destiny helped fill a nice void I've missed for a while. After numerous delays, Mighty No. 9 was finally unleashed on the world. It sucked. And that's enough of a reason to go play through the Mega Man X series. Mega Man X4 has come out as my favorite, with some beautiful sprite work and the fast gameplay the series is known for. X4 manages to be challenging without feeling thoughtless. Each stage just clicks, with plenty of secrets to find and collect. The anime cutscenes and voice acting are awful, yet all of it has a shade of charm that wasn't captured in the dialogue-heavy sequels. X4 looks, sounds, and plays like the first real jump for the series, and for good reason. It's the best there is. Final Fantasy XV came out with an enormous amount of hype that it couldn't possibly live up to, only a few shades removed from Half-Life 3. And while it wasn't the definitive experience that many people had hoped for, it was the second coming of Final Fantasy. Let's be honest, to market this game like Square Enix did and still stick with the turn-based combat of old in 2016 just wasn't going to work. The combat this time around is generally fluid, and constantly keeps things moving, with warping all around to whip the hell out of enemies. The overall narrative starts off interesting, but winds up petering out at the end. Normally that's a problem in a JRPG, but the focus is more on the four main characters and the bond between them. Noctis, Gladio, Ignis, and Prompto are all well written and likable, and you wind up caring more about the journey rather than the destination, both metaphorically and literally. Final Fantasy XV seems like the start of some exciting changes for the series, a lot of which will hopefully be in the 7 remake. If you enjoyed the Ace Attorney series, Danganronpa is like its cracked out cousin. Featuring a myriad of memorable characters, Danganronpa is packed with moments that are burned into your brain. From each murder to every floor of the school the Ultimates are trapped in. There's not a whole lot that can be said without spoiling the whole game, so I'll just put it like this. While not always cohesive, Danganronpa and Trigger Happy Panic hits those right notes by being sometimes funny, sometimes shocking, and always very strange. I'm pretty sure it's almost impossible to screw up a Kirby platformer. At the same time, it's also easy to retread old ground and not mix things up too terribly much either. Kirby Planet Robobot manages to bring enough new while encapsulating the best parts of previous Kirby games. The mechs are much less of a gimmick than the Hypernova in Triple Deluxe, and are interwoven into the gameplay far better. The puzzles are clever and require thinking, though like most Kirby games, the difficulty is going to come from finding secrets and collecting everything. Past that, Planet Robobot is one of the best Kirby games to date, and with its 3D subgame proving that Kirby can work in 3D, it might be time for the puffball to move outside his normal boundaries. Video games based on movies usually suck, but movies based on video games always suck, and the Ratchet & Clank movie was no exception. But the game, which is essentially a remake of the first, was what every remake should strive to be. Sure, there's a slightly smaller weapon selection and less locales that the duo visit, but the snappy jokes and tight controls harken back to when video games were about weird animals going on sprawling, colorful adventures. Ratchet & Clank is an absolute blast from start to finish, and ironically winds up telling the story much better than the movie does. Sony has gotten behind remaking and remastering a lot of its old titles recently, with Crash Bandicoot and Parappa the Rapper due later this year, so let's hope that train keeps rolling with more Ratchet & Clank. Games built around using a touchscreen have been around for well over a decade now, so you would assume Severed would be too little too late to the party. Lo and behold, it's the best use of a touchscreen I've played in ages, possibly ever. The combat is built around finding an enemy's weakness and then swiping the screen repeatedly to attack, while also expertly parrying for defense and gaining powers to aid you. You'll encounter a lot of the same enemies with different stat boosts or colors, but Severed is smart enough to have you fight groups of enemies. Juggling between them to ensure you survive can take an absurd amount of concentration, but every single battle feels worth it in the end. As gorgeous to look at as it is to play, Severed is one hell of a time for those looking for just a touch of light RPG dungeon crawling action. Uncharted 4 is the supposed final chapter in Nathan Drake's story, and it's the best way for him to go out. The narrative is more character-driven this time around, with the relationship between Nathan Drake and his brother, and how that brings Drake out of his domesticated life and into treasure hunting once more. The voice acting is as spot on as always, with a superb script. The characters feel as alive as they ever have. The only real issue 4 has is the same rut as previous games in the series, and that the replay only goes so far. Still, the ride that it takes players on is unforgettable and shows off some of the most breathtaking landscapes ever produced in a video game. Uncharted 4 is exciting the whole way through, with one nice little bow of an ending to top it all off. This game should not be on this list. It's the best games I've played and beaten for the first time in 2016. And this shouldn't be here, but it is. Super Metroid still holds up for a first playthrough after all these years, combining the chilling atmosphere of prior games to the most stunning art and sound the SNES could produce. From the second you hear this, crystal clear, you know you're in for something unique. This is Metroid at its absolute best. There's plenty of exploring to be done, upgrades to find, and huge bosses to conquer so you can move on, accumulating in one of the most exciting final boss fights of all time. It doesn't get much better than this on the Super Nintendo, and there's a reason that Super Metroid is hailed as one of, if not the greatest game to grace the system. The final game, like the previous, should not be on this list. To be fair, I tried many times before to get into it, and I just couldn't. But something clicked after playing Super Metroid, and I found myself falling in love with Castlevania Symphony of the Night. Symphony of the Night was the first game to take a page from the Metroid series book and slam it with Castlevania's precise platforming. Together, with a campy story involving the vampire-killing clan the Belmonts and Dracula's son Alucard, you have one of the greatest PlayStation games ever made. The use of 3D is minimal and is usually only there to enhance entrances or the occasional enemy. Everything else is stunning, with the haunting walls of Dracula's castle holding secrets at every turn. New weapons, spells, armor, all sorts of different powers to collect and help make Alucard stronger. Symphony of the Night just barely edges out Super Metroid in my book, by delivering some heavier RPG elements that mesh well with the myriad of jumping and stabbing you'll do throughout the adventure. Like I said, Castlevania Symphony of the Night probably shouldn't be on this list, but that's the greatest part of a good game. If it's timeless, it doesn't matter when you get to play, so long as you eventually do. 2017 holds a bright future for gaming. We've got some exciting prospects like the Switch, a renaissance of 3D platformers with the Crash Bandicoot remasters, Yooka-Laylee, and A Hat in Time. We'll be looking forward to new installments of games like Sonic Mania and The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, and we'll all find out together where VR stands. Here's looking at making 2017 better than 2016, even if the bar's set pretty low.